Live from the Talking Joe Studios. It's Talking Joe.
They seem normal.
Hey. Welcome to a very special edition of Talking Joe live stream where we're looking at original art. And this is it, the ultimate grail piece for G.I. Joe original art. We're talking today about issue 21 and talking specifically to the collector who has the issue in full. We'll be meeting him very shortly, as well as my co-presenter. I'll just remind us, everyone at the outset, that you can leave messages for us during this live stream. So if you want to get involved, you can do that. But without too much further ado, let me introduce my co-host.
I really want to talk Joe with you. It's a real American Tim. American Tim.
Hello,
There
Mark.
he is.
And hello, viewers. And if you're listening to an audio version of this later, hello, listeners. But mostly hello, viewers.
Very good. How are you today, Tim?
I'm well. I'm very excited to get my eyeballs on these Grail pieces.
Excellent. I think it might be the first public airing ever, so it's very, very exciting. Let's meet the person who's gonna tell us all about it, the whole story, and he might know, having watched previous episodes, that you come on the show, you get a jingle. Here it is. Tim is so scared.
Comic art is a preference for the habitual collector in what is known as Gene Park's life.
Oh my. That was fabulous.
Thank you. Here he is, the man, Gene Park. And we're gathered here today to look at the original art for issue 21 of G.I. Joe. And I've learned about it from your collection on Comic Art Fans. You've got two photos on there. I think the first page and then a collection, then a sort of an assortment of all of the pages laid out, as we can see on screen. And many times, as I've been flicking through Comic Art Fans, I've sort of returned to that view and thought, wow, that is some collection to have. So where to begin? Can you sort of tell us, how you got to the place where you somehow have collected issue 21 in its entirety?
Sure. So I started collecting comics in 1983, and I did not even know that original art existed until 2002, when I just stumbled across an eBay listing for a Mike Deodato Electra 2-page splash, which I purchased. And then once I had it in hand, I was like, wow, you can actually own an original for to these comics that I grew up with and loved. And so it was in 2003 when I was on eBay and I found these Larry Hama drawn Daredevil 196 preliminary pages, just pencil prelims, on kind of very small pieces of paper, very, very loose. That was the issue, if you were collecting around that time, that had an early Wolverine guest appearance, which, since the 90s, the character has been overexposed, really. But back then, Wolverine guest appearance was a big deal. So it was a very memorable issue. And I remember I ended up getting 3 preliminary pages from on eBay from the issue, and I'll have to check my records. They were either $5 each or $15 each. I mean, it was a really small amount. And so I found out that the seller his offices were only 4 blocks away from where I was working, and given the kind of the low cost and kind of proximity to it, one of us suggested to each other, hey, why don't I just come over, during lunch hour, and we can settle up in person. And that's exactly what I did. And that is how I met Ben Smith, who was part of Metropolis Comics / Metropolis Collectibles, which is still, I believe it's still the largest comic book dealer in the world. And Ben was running kind of a side project called Gotham City Art, and he was repping Larry Hama at the time. And so I walk in, I meet Ben for the first time, and he's got the Daredevil prelims, and then he mentions to me, hey, do you want to see something really cool? And I'm like, well, of course, I'm here. Of course, I'd like to see something.
How can you say no to that question?
So he goes into the back room and he pulls out, the complete interior 22-page story to G.I. Joe 21. And my mind is blown at this point. I mean, it's at this point I've been collecting for maybe 6 months, 8 months, and I haven't really picked up anything really special yet. Just kind of getting my feet wet. And then he pulls this out, and I was stunned, and I said, of course I would love to own this. And I don't remember exactly what it went, but I think he said that, Larry is willing to part with it. So I ended up, over the next, day or two, making an offer that, which was, very good at the time. I mean, I remember, some of the trade publications, the Comics Journal, Wizard ended up covering the sale, and cited as kind of I think, quote, a healthy 5-figure sum. And people, look, nowadays, given where art prices are, people can't really believe, that was so low. But at the time, I assure you, that is not what people thought. I remember there was a mailing list on Yahoo Groups called the Comic Art L that went on for I think a couple of decades. And, there were people on it saying, oh, my God, can you believe somebody paid 5 figures for this? I mean, that's stupid. It's insane. But yeah, I mean, look, I was thrilled to get it. I was glad that we could come to a price that made sense for both of us at the time. And so, I mean, that was, I think, probably the first really significant piece of published comic art that I purchased. I want to say it was around June 2003 or thereabouts, and I've owned it ever since. I mean, obviously, over the years there's been a lot of interest, but I love this, love the story, love the book, love the nostalgia that it evokes, and so I've never been even remotely tempted to part with it. And another reason for that is because Ben Smith and I actually ended up becoming very good friends, and I actually met my wife at his wedding some years later. So in a sense, G.I. Joe 21 or the Daredevil 196 prelims, I mean, all of that kind of brought me and my wife and our now family together. So it's got a lot of meaning for me on many different levels. And that's kind of the background story. And
I was going to say, and obviously, looking back in historical retrospect, we know that it's a very good price that you would have paid, no matter what that price would have been at the time. We can have a guess that it will be worth a lot more now, but at the time, obviously, it sounds like it was quite a big chunk. So, what was kind of the connection to this specific issue, which kind of made you come to the conclusion that it was worth paying what was a significant amount of money for this at the time?
I think for that, I like I said, I started reading and collecting comics in 1983. Now, I used to share a paper route when I was a kid with and a friend of mine in the summer of '83 introduced me to comics. I mean, so he gave me it was mostly X-Men and Red Sonja, as I recall, comics to borrow and read, and that's how I kind of got hooked on it. But it took a few months later that before I actually started buying them for myself and collecting comics. So the first month, cover dated month of issues that I bought was December 1983. I remember the first comics I bought were X-Men 176, Red Sonja #3, and it was right around that. I don't remember what the cover date of 21 was, but I remember the first issue of G.I. Joe that I bought was 20, and that's the one with I want to say it's Clutch falling out of the airplane or helicopter on the cover. And so issue 21 was the second G.I. Joe story that I ever read. I want to say it was either January or March 1984 cover dated, if I recall. And so, yeah, I mean, it was the second issue of the series that I read. And it was something that I had never read up to that point. I mean, I hadn't been reading comics for very long, but the concept of a wordless, story told in that fashion was just, it was completely unique, and it introduced, this exciting new character, Storm Shadow. And I remember buying a couple copies off the comic stands, which used to have back in the day at the supermarket, no less. And it is an issue that just stuck with me my entire life. So when I had the chance to buy, I knew that I didn't want to screw this up, and that I really wanted to get this. So, yeah.
Couple follow-ups.
Mm-hmm.
So did you just say that you bought several copies of issue 21 off of a spinner rack at your grocery store?
I ended up buying 2. And actually, I'm pleased to say that I actually I got them both CGC slab probably about 20 years ago. Unfortunately, I sold one of them. If somebody out there has a copy of issue 21, I think it's graded 9.0 or 9.2. The unique thing about it is it has 2 covers. And at this point, I feel really stupid for letting it go. But as I got more into original art, I started letting go of some comics and stuff. So out there somewhere is a double covered issue, CGC graded issue 21. That used to be mine, newsstand variety. And I was actually recently just looking through what I still had in terms of comics, and I was pleased to see that I kept the other one, because I actually wasn't sure. It's been so long since I've gone through my piles of comics. So
but why did you buy a second copy, or why did you buy 2 at the same time? That feels unusual for someone who's brand new to comics.
I don't know why I bought 2 of that issue in particular, but at the time, as you recall, I mean, the X-Men were the hottest property at Marvel, and I remember going to my local comic shop, and the those Byrne X-Men issues in particular were up on the wall, even at the time, for $15, $20, $25, and which was an astronomical sum in 1983, 84. I mean, it might as well have been, $100, 200, 500, 1,000. It's just out of reach for a kid like myself. So the guy, a couple of friends, as I mentioned, who got me into collecting, and they were like, "Oh, well, you should be buying, 2 copies a month of the X-Men, one to read, one to bag." And so I did that. And I guess for certain other special issues like G.I. Joe 21, I did the same thing.
And that you were new to comics, and that this issue was wordless, that didn't feel weird, and it didn't feel like a ripoff, because Larry Hama has explained in interviews and at conventions that some letters came in after issue 21, right? Like at least one reader, and maybe many readers, either thought that this was a ripoff,
right?
Or I think someone said like, "Oh, did the letters fall off? Like, is my issue like a misprint, or is every issue a misprint?" So this was a cool thing, or this was like a neutral thing. This wasn't like strange or confusing to you.
No. It was clear from the story that it was meant to be this way. And obviously, on the cover it says the most unusual G.I. Joe story of all, or whatever. And I don't remember exactly what I was thinking then, but no, I did not feel cheated in any way, shape, or form. And I remember just thinking it was super, super cool.
My second follow-up question is, after you bought the complete art to a comic book, did you now consider wanting to buy the complete art to other comic books? because people buy pages and covers.
Right.
People might buy like 2 pages in a row, certainly a double page
Mhm.
spread. But do you have, or are you looking for other complete issues?
Yeah, it was more of a one-off. I mean, once I bought G.I. Joe 21, I didn't immediately go out in search of other complete books. And, you know, as you know, most books have been broken up over the years anyway, but it is really cool to own a complete interior story. I mean, I rarely go to my trade paperback and read G.I. Joe 21. I often, though, will pull out my Itoya portfolio with the original art in it and flip through that instead. That said, over the years, I have purchased a number of other complete stories. Like I have for not G.I. Joe related, but I have the complete Obnoxio the Clown versus the X-Men #1 complete interior story. I think that came out maybe 1982 or thereabouts. I have the complete Tomb of Dracula #25, the first Hannibal King issue. I have most of Red Sonja #7. And I have I've been one of my kind of lifelong projects in collecting is to try and reassemble X-Men 172. Chris Claremont writing, Paul Smith and Bob Wyacek did the art on that, and that was the issue that hooked me into comics for good in the summer of 1983. And I've managed to acquire the cover, and I think at this point I'm up to 15 of the 22 pages. So it'd be great if I'm able to complete that one day. I'm not really holding my breath, but that's those are pages I'm always on the lookout for. But other than those, I have not really sought out complete books.
How long did you continue to read the monthly G.I. Joe comic?
Good question. So, as I mentioned, I started with issue 20 to the extent I could, because, G.I. Joe was a very hot book back then. It was tough to get those early copies because they were quite pricey. That said, they did reprint. I remember going to my local, I think it was Target. They used to sell reprints of, I think, 1, 2, and 3, or 2, 3, and 4, or something in a poly bag, second printings. They also did that with G.I. Joe 21, incidentally. So I read most of the issues that I missed from 1 to 19. I did get a copy of issue 1, and I also had the big Marvel Treasury edition where they reprinted it. And then I read up to, I actually have it cataloged somewhere, but I think it was around issue 72 is when I dropped off. I mean, at that point I was, in high school and concentrating on academics, trying to get into college. I played football, American football, the last couple of years. So I was a lot busier towards the second half of my high school experience. And as a result, I ended up dropping a lot of comics reading during that time.
And have you returned to G.I. Joe? Because obviously Larry Hama has returned to writing it.
Right.
We were talking just before we started as well that you've started getting into the toys in a later stage of your life, not having passed them by in your youth.
Yes. So I never collected the toys as a kid, but as you can see, kind of up above, and I have a lot more squirreled away elsewhere. I've started collecting the G.I. Joe classified figures. I really love. I mean, they're doing a great job with the toys, the 6-inch figures. I've got probably 5 Snake Eyes, one of which is loose out there on a stand, as you can see. So I'm enjoying that. I enjoyed the cartoon as well, of course, back in the day. In terms of going back to the comics, I did pick it up again when Devil's Due started publishing their series in, I forget when it was, like 2003 maybe or thereabouts. I read that for a while, but then I dropped off, and kind of just being involved in adult career stuff and stuff, just got busy and didn't really pick it up. I know I've heard that Larry's come back, and I've heard of all these interesting projects that they've done over the years, but I haven't really explored that as of yet.
Okay. Shall we get into having a look at this thing?
Sure.
So I know let's tantalize the viewers with a little sneak preview, because I think you've got the issues, the pages to hand. So
Yeah.
let's have a quick look just to see it in the flesh. Here we go.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
There's the splash page. Storm Shadow jetpacking in with Scarlet in tow.
Wow.
Excellent.
We should- there's probably nothing interesting on the backs of any of the pages.
There is, as I was taking them out of the portfolio, there is one Snake Eye sketch on one of them,
Oh, wow.
which
Okay.
I can show you that. But I think there was just the one page.
This might be probably everyone watching this knows, but just in case, right? This issue was running late, and so Hama said to the editor, if I can sort of write and kind of draw this issue at the same time, we can save a lot of time, because I can draw, and when I write comics, I'm really just seeing pictures in my head. And thank you to Mark for continuing this correction. Right, I'm interrupting myself. Right, the cover to GI Joe. The cover to GI Joe 21 is penciled by Ed Hannigan. It's not penciled by Larry Hama. Right, we know that logically, because if the issue was behind schedule, Hama would not have done breakdowns for 22 pages and also a cover. They would have definitely given that to someone else to save time. Hannigan was doing a lot of covers for Marvel at the time. And also, though the initials in the bottom corner of this cover are really hard to read, they are Hannigan's initials, and they are not Hama's initials, though it kind of looks like that. So famously, Hama said, why don't I'll make it a wordless story. We'll get someone to finish, right, to ink my breakdowns, who's really good and fast. And by not having it lettered, we'll save 3 days. And so this was done to get the book back on schedule. This was not done because Hama was thinking, how can I creatively innovate and do something that Marvel hasn't done before, right? Hama did do that later, now and then with G.I. Joe and other projects. But this was really, how can I change or simplify this object so that it is faster to make?
I think the idea of this silent issue had been brewing in his head as well. So sort of creatively, it was lurking in the background that he felt like a lot of things were overwritten. There was too much text on the page of what should be a visual medium. So I think that idea was percolating there, and it sort of came together with this instance where they're behind schedule and they just need to make it up. And this is, that idea combined with the sort of the time saving device. Sort of came together. So he sort of recalling the story, exactly what happened. Who knows? But as Larry tells it, that Denny O'Neil, the editor, had a chaotic desk and something got lost or disorganized or whatever, and they needed to do a new issue. It would normally have a lead time of about 3 months. They needed it in 3 weeks. So he thought, if I can write it and pencil it together, then there's sort of that time saving. So he's doing the breakdowns, and apparently he wrote it and drew it together over the course of a weekend, sort of starting Friday and handing it on Monday. It was then FedExed over to Steve Leialoha in San Francisco, and then it was colored as the pages came in, and then they saved the time on the lettering, and it could be justified from the fact that they wanted it to be silent with no letters. It was Snake Eyes, who's a silent character on a stealthy mission, and also that idea of trying to avoid the lettering fed into the storytelling. So, for example, setting it in just one place, and then you don't need to have the captions establishing where things are.
And I'll add one last bit of context. Hama had drawn storyboards and illustration and cartoons for continuity. Neil Adams' studio, also in New York, and he'd been published in magazines and newspapers. And so, we think of him mostly as a comics writer, but he'd already drawn comics for Marvel and other publishers, and he had drawn a lot of stuff. And if you're an illustrator, right, the whole point of, the definition of illustration is a drawing that tells a story.
Mm-hmm.
And as a sort of visual storyteller, he describes it that when he's writing, he's just describing the pictures that he can already see in his head. So instead of writing that as a script, he can just put those down as drawings that already exist in his mind. Gene, sorry, you wanted to.
Oh yeah, I mean back to the point about kind of the inspiration or the logistics behind this. It was always my impression, or I had heard that. Larry was kind of riffing off of the opening 4 or 5 page sequence of Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. #1, which is a wordless infiltration by Nick Fury into, I think it's Hydra headquarters or whatever, back in issue 1 from 1968. And I thought that was kind of the inspiration for it, and that he, wanted to flesh it out over a whole book. So I don't know if that was part of what was percolating in his head, in terms of the basis for a wordless issue to begin with, and then just the timing, deadline, circumstances is what kind of propelled that forward. Or, I mean, do you know any more about that? Or
I've heard him talk about Steranko's sequence in that S.H.I.E.L.D. story, right? And it's a 3-page. I think it may only be 3 pages.
Okay.
But I haven't heard him go into any more detail than that. But, anyone who was paying attention to comics in the 60s and 70s was aware of this small but amazing body of work that Steranko did at Marvel on X-Men and S.H.I.E.L.D. So yes, you are. That is definitely part of this mix, and thank you for bringing it up.
Okay. So I just wanted to make sure it wasn't apocryphal or an urban legend or anything. It was actually part of his thinking.
Yes,
I've got a follow-up question for both of you. Do you know if this cover exists out there somewhere in the wild? And Gene, have you sort of tried to track it down and reunite it with its brother pages?
Yes, I have definitely tried to track it down. I mean, as far as I know, Larry doesn't have it. After I learned that Hannigan was actually the penciler on the cover, I reached out to him. I never heard back. I believe I asked Klaus at a show some years ago, and no luck there either. So I don't know. I mean, a lot of the G.I. Joe art is just nobody knows where it is. It may be that somebody has it and just doesn't want to show it, hoping to reunite it with the rest of the story one day, which I don't know. But I've never heard any confirmation of its existence.
I have not either. I know that a later G.I. Joe cover was given to a Hasbro employee. And I have wondered now and then if, a small handful of other covers that art collectors haven't been able to place are, like on a wall in Rhode Island with some like former Hasbro marketing or designer person.
Yeah. So I don't know where this one is. I mean, obviously this is the cover that I would love the most. I know a lot of people love the #2 cover. I don't think that one has. Actually, I'm not sure. Maybe that one has surfaced.
That one got scanned because wasn't IDW used that for the cover for the artist's edition that didn't happen.
Yeah, you're right. I think Chuck was in touch with Chuck Costas, who was on a previous podcast. I think he mentioned that he had tracked that one down. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, because I know some people have talked about it now on the CGC forums. It's a big comic art chat board, that the G.I. Joe 1 cover surfaced. I want to say maybe 2 years ago. I was very interested in it because I know the dealer who brokered it, but apparently what I was told is that it was promised to whoever bought it. So unfortunately, I didn't really get a chance to go for it. And I know Chuck would have loved to have it as well, and as would a lot of other people. But that one did turn up apparently.
Let's look at page 1, Mark.
Okay. Well, before we get to page 1, it's not quite as impressive as Gene's collection, but here's something from my own collection. On the left is a Larry Hama original sort of breakdown style recreation of the first, what's issue 2021 that he didn't actually get to draw at the time. And on the right is a Guillermo Ortega inked version of that sketch, and you'll notice there's subtle and not so subtle differences in the pose. So it's not a line for line recreation by any means, but it's something fun from my own collection.
Wow, that's great. That's a nice. It's not icing on the cake because that's a nice icing in the cake before the cake.
Is it a cake?
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah, that's great.
Okie dokie, here we go. Page 1. And for these slides, I've got the colored version side by side.
And importantly, you have the colored version as originally printed on newsprint and not the digital chameleon. No. Digital Chameleon did a wonderful job re-separating issues 1 through 50 for the Marvel softcover paperbacks back in 2002. And IDW uses those files for classic G.I. Joe softcovers 1 through 5 and complete collection hardcovers 1, 2, and 3. It is issues 51 and up where they're using full saturation on colors, and it doesn't quite match to my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say that the coloring is very faithful in terms of those trade paperback reprints. It just doesn't quite aesthetically match when it's on the glossy paper as to the newsprint. It just, while the colors are basically the same, it just doesn't quite feel the same.
What really jumps out at me here is the 2 bits of mountaintop on the top right of the cover on either side of the tallest Cobra Tower, where Hama and Leialoha are just indicating this mountain in the distance. And one, the colorist is going to create that color hold where the color of the mountain meets the color of the sky, and they're not divided by a black line. And 2, the shading on that mountain in the distance indicates that this mountain is underlit, and that matches the light, the inking on the castle, where all the stipples right to the lower left of Storm Shadow's foot, and then under the right side of under the right wing of the jetpack. All these directional lines are indicating that the light source for this page is either the Cobra Claw itself or something in front of it, right? But much of the castle all the castle that's on the top half of the page is lit from below. And even if the coloring doesn't, I mean, nowadays you'd render that with a gradient. You'd have like dark orange at the top and light orange at the bottom. And that's not happening in the colors here because the inking is doing that job for it. But I'm always fascinated by the green, the light green in the sort of center right of this page, because it feels like it glows. Mm-hmm. It feels like there's something else that is illuminating between the mountain that is closer all the way on the right, which has this more like 50% green, and then the further back mountain, which has more of a 25% green. And of course, I find 25% green is not a real thing because that's a percentage of yellow and blue. But anyway, here's a shorthand.
And Larry describes, drawing this in what was it?
Curvilinear perspective.
Curvilinear perspective. So that, and with no straight lines, because organically our eye is a ball. We don't really in real life see the curved lines, and you wouldn't necessarily guess that just to look at this quickly. That these lines aren't dead on straight. And this is the only.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and this is the only place in this issue where we get to see the full castle, top to bottom. So sort of really establishing very clear kind of bold shapes to establish where in the castle we are. That we've got these bold cobras up the very top of it. We've got 2 radar dishes to the sides, and they are distinctly different radars. We've got these battlements up here with the up and downs. We've got one set of small windows and one set of tall windows, and Storm Shadow on his claw is going in this direction into that middle window. We've also got some stuff in there. In here, we've got the rockets and a gun emplacement there, which Larry describes as including putting in stuff that might be useful for the story later on, but doesn't actually see usage in this particular story. But many years later, when we return to the scene of the Silent Castle, they do actually become quite key storytelling points in terms of defending it from the Joes who are coming down this mountain path in that direction. So the groundwork laid in 84 sort of paying off almost 10 years later.
And what was that story that where they return? I don't remember at this point.
It's during the Andrew Wildman run, right?
That's right. Yeah. So Destro is back at sort of as a solo agent and back in his castle, and Cobra aren't having any of it. So sort of Joes are coming in almost to sort of defend Destro. The other interesting observation I was going to put around this Silent Castle is that it was based, inspired by the Cobra Temple, and apparently the story behind that is that Larry was visiting Sunbow Entertainment, and was looking over the shoulder of storyboard artist George Foster Good, and caught a glimpse of this. So I think sort of that played into the thinking for the design of this particular for the castle. So not direct, but you can kind of see the influences, particularly on this top section there of the castle. And you wouldn't have seen the animated version; it would have been an early design.
We should credit the person who discovered that. That comes from Mark Palomo, right?
So I'm lifting that bit of intel from Mark Belomo's introduction to the 30th anniversary edition of the Silent Interlude. Thanks.
Wow.
So this is one of those rare cases where the comic is influenced by the show, and otherwise, Hama and the people working on the comic were not in any contact with the people working on the show, and Hasbro wasn't necessarily encouraging that. Hasbro was just making toys and wrangling a show, and separately wrangling a comic.
And Larry says that he wasn't watching the cartoon and still hasn't today really watched the cartoon. So there wasn't too much sort of direct inspiration from the cartoon back into the comic.
I think that my other comment about this page is that this comic book is an institution now. It's something that non GI Joe fans know about. And I think there are like articles or the occasional sort of book, like famous comic books or important stories to know about. And this issue sometimes makes that kind of list, even though no issue of GI Joe is going to get that kind of recommendation from, a comics journalist or a blogger who's not paying attention to GI Joe. And this page invites you in. Like this page, Marvel, it was pretty standard in the 80s that the first page of a Marvel comic would be a full page splash. There are some later issues of GI Joe where the first page has several panels, and then pages 2 and 3 are a double page splash with the title and credits. But this is not a glamour shot of, story. If this was a Marvel book in 1966, it would probably have a full page drawing of Storm Shadow, like kicking at Snake Eyes, and it would say like, "Lo, gentle reader, what is this betrayal by someone from his past? Read on to discover." Right. This is not, like this is such an exciting. This is an amazing, exciting page. It's not a full body shot of someone up close. It's not a pinup that mimics a cover. And it's not like a story continuity page with lots of different things happening, but embedded in it, in the layout, right? Like your eyes led to that center window that we're going to go through. You immediately wonder like who the passenger is. We haven't seen this castle before in comics. We haven't seen this vehicle before, right, Mark, in comics?
I think you're right. I think this might be the first appearance, yeah.
Everyone's Silent Interlude, first appearance of Storm Shadow in the comics. Also, I think. Let us know in the comments if I'm wrong, internet. But Storm Shadow has just flown past us, and I feel like if this were a film, the camera would also be pushing in a little bit to follow, right? This question, this drawing brings us in.
Yeah.
And the blue and the pink and the purple in the background are so striking against the orange and the green and the blue. And I've said when I talk about coloring in comics and sometimes inking, less is often more. And this page is gorgeous and utterly clear, and that comes from like great composition, careful placement of blacks, and just like 9 colors. It's like you don't need like 900 colors to make this page better. Page 2.
Okay, push on. Page 2. Here we go. It's Storm Shadow coming in through that center window, which, as originally published, was white with the 2 other windows being blue. I think that gets corrected in the modern editions.
One of two coloring mistakes in this comic. Speaking of color, right? This is another one of those cases where something that I love about comics from the 30s to the 80s is that for clarity and for visual variety, yellow and orange and pink are often slapped on as a background element, right? So those 3 panels on the bottom, I don't know that I believe that the floor is actually yellow, but that doesn't matter because the yellow is to set off against the blue and the orange. And similarly, the orange in the panel of him landing on the left and him drawing his sword on the right, like that's not literal. That's not the color of the wall. We've already seen the color of the wall is sort of white stone. This is to create a pattern of variety on a page. And with 16 million colors in Photoshop, this kind of treatment does not frequently occur to comics colorists because it's like, oh, well, the wall's like light stone gray. I can make it light stone gray, or I can take a photo of stone and put it in the background. People might say like, oh, it's old school. I just think it's awesome.
I completely agree because I have been reading this story again as original art. I've got the trade paperback version with the that's been recolored, and I've also read it digitally on my tablet. And so this is the first time maybe since the 80s or early 90s, and I'm actually seeing it in this form. And wow, I mean, it makes a huge difference. I mean, difference. It is just so much more visually striking and interesting than what you see in the trade paperback and digital versions these days.
Comics that were drawn for the limited palette of 4-color printing, comics that were drawn for 64 colors, really don't want like 900 colors or 16 million colors.
What we see on this, sorry,
go for it.
So what we see on this page, as well as kind of the beginnings of Larry using some very effective visual storytelling to mean that he can draw less effectively. So we've got a panel up here which has got a more elaborate background, the Cobra sigil, the Storm Shadow flying through, the braziers. But even here, it sort of hints at saving time, but describing so much more. So we just got all of the tops of these Cobra troopers down here on the bottom of that panel, drawing those half circles to hint at the army stood in front of Cobra Commander. And then once he's done that, we're not needing to see background in absolutely every single panel. As you've seen before, we can just have a flat color.
And this large panel 2 of Storm Shadow coming in through the window, that's drawn in 1-point perspective, which is really easy. And also there's very little linear perspective. There's just a little bit on those two braziers. But we're just looking straight at this wall. Imagine whatever the shape of this room is. Imagine if the camera, quote unquote, was placed in one of the high corners where the wall meets the ceiling, and it looked down at the whole room, and you'd see the whole room not as with a square floor, but in perspective is like a diamond floor or a trapezoid, and walls, and again, as Mark says, lots of people. This is not all of this. None of this is lazy, right? Like you've seen comic stories where like there's a lot of detail, and then at the end of the issue there's much less detail, or like suddenly a bunch of stuff is in silhouette, or backgrounds drop out, or maybe there are no backgrounds.
Right.
This is all very carefully and smartly chosen and designed. And that second panel, that's not like, oh, this guy's trying not to draw a bunch of guys with full bodies in perspective. It just ends up being this really bold composition of this diagonal slash through this panel with this round circle behind it, and who's important, right? The guy flying the thing and the guy standing under him. It's the symmetry of it is striking.
The other story that I've heard about this is that a lot of the panel breakdowns were drawn in advance. Either, I'm not sure if interpretation, either at the very beginning before necessarily the page has been planned out, or even kind of right at before, when faced with the stack of the 22 pages. I'm going to lay out absolutely every page. Panel. Put the panels into place for absolutely every single one of these pages. So it's like the panels kind of dictating a lot of what can fit in there to a degree.
Yeah, if I can rephrase that a little bit, Hama would draw a rectangle. Like, okay, well, this is going to be a tall, skinny rectangle, or this panel is going to be a bigger square, or I'm going to have 3 rectangles next to each other, and they're each going to be tall and skinny, right? And these shapes would tend to suggest a certain composition or a certain amount of story and a certain rhythm of pacing. So yes, Mark, that's a good reminder. And that, either you're incredibly lucky if you sort of throw that out there and then stumble your way through it, or you just have a very embedded and developed sense of visual storytelling, of composition, of, drawing characters and anatomy and acting. Because this is all a kind of problem solving. This isn't just like, can I do this really, really fast, right? Because not anybody, but more people could just like stay up all night and like draw this a lot, the sort of the hard way, and like get the issue out, a version of the issue out on time.
I was just craning my head to see what the text on the right said. It says Cobra Commander on pedestal. Because I guess that's the fun of seeing the original art is all of the little things that are written in the margins, and then in retrospect trying to figure out what on earth they might mean. I guess that one
I think
is more obvious, but
I think Hama's saying these three guys. It's the top one in the center, who's this very particular guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because it's drawn as a breakdown, so it's Leialoha filling in the details, I guess, for the character. Hey, next up.
Again, a lot of these are straight on angles, and you learn. I don't know if you're a kid who likes to draw and you're the kid in class who draws really well. Somewhere around 7th or 8th grade or in high school, you sort of learn this lesson that drawing things straight on is boring or flat or lazy, and that you need to use a film term, like move the camera around and draw like up shots and down shots and angles and sometimes in comics and in movie posters and in illustration, sometimes a straight on angle is the clearest or is the most bold and direct. And this third panel right here, like if for those of you who are looking at me right now, like you could have Cobra Commander, like get my hands into the shot, like what? You could have him in contrapposto, you could have him at his arms could be up. That might not be sort of his acting style. He's the guy in charge. He's going to be more restrained. But two, this is. I'm just going to keep saying the B word over and over. This is bold, right? And look at the storytelling in panel 2, right? Scarlett's got one eye closed with a black eye. She's sort of surprised, but she's not worried. She's not fearful, having 1, just been kidnapped, 2, just been flown in a bag, 3, not know where she is, 4, oh my gosh, here's Cobra Commander, 5, the bag just got chopped off me with a sword, right? Like the levels of fun and cool here are so layered and embedded, like we forget half them. It's like, oh yeah, the wordless issue of G.I. Joe. Like, no, this ninja just didn't like serrate Scarlet. But again, look at the storytelling here. Storm Shadow is looking back at us in panel 2, right? So panel 2 is point of view from Cobra Commander. Mm-hmm. He's looking at us, she's looking at us, we're Cobra Commander, and then Hama lines up Storm Shadow's eye line with Cobra Commander's eye line in the next panel, which creates a little visual link. And that may have been on purpose, or that may have just been sort of good instincts running in the background.
And he's mixing it up as well, because we've got the, as you say, the sort of the more dead-on angles, but then, in panel 4, mixing it up. Every page we're going to be sort of doing a more complicated thing alongside a more straightforward thing. So we've got the down angle from Cobra Commander, and then looking up as they're descending down these stairs, and the sort of the design, the sort of the simple design of each of these locations, so that we can keep on returning back to them without being told we're back in the dungeon, we're back up in the top of the castle, is just so genius. We've just got these little cues. We've got the almost the manhole cover that we keep on returning to. We've got the staircase with a circular top to it, distinguishing it from any of the other staircases we see. We've got a light bulb there, and so when we're cutting back to that, it's immediately obvious where we're returning to. And similarly in this last panel as well, Larry's able to save himself a bunch of time by much more easily showing us the top of the castle that's already been established on page 1. We know where it is. We're looking up and getting the hint at this Hercules plane drawn in, all in silhouette. Don't have to draw a huge hulking plane in perspective with every single detail coming off it as it's introduced.
Mark, can you zoom in on the final 2 panels here? because we're going to keep saying like, oh, the story, the layout, this is so great. You know, Larry Hama this, Larry Hama that. And I will admit, you know, I'm good at picking out a bunch of inkers for their style, and I've never quite sort of figured out how to identify Steve Leialoha's inking style, even though here it is right in front of me. You know, that hatching and cross hatching in this middle panel here, that the two cobras on the bottom are underlit from this circular hole in the floor. And then once again, in the final panel, right, this cobra temple is underlit. So, you know, I'll talk about the color and the paper a lot, right? We can talk about the acting and the storytelling and the poses and the layout and the compositions. You know, this wouldn't have worked with a less talented and fast, not just inker, but finisher. So, you know, Hama gets like 89% of the credit for this issue. But
as you say, you know, Hama's responsible there for the, you know, the acting, the storytelling, the layout, but the finishes are Leialoha, and all of this detail in the inks, that great inking in the tower on the bottom right, you know, this sort of stippled, you know, black lines sort of coming down from this archway, that's all going to be Leialoha. So it looks great, and that will be in large part due to the fact that this is a team to produce the finished art.
And there are inkers who, there are inkers who would have done a good job with this, but it would not have been as pretty, or it would not have been as specific. I mean, the 1980s at Marvel, there are dozens and dozens of examples of comics that were drawn or finished under a terrible deadline burden that, you know, are like legible, but not great. But they sure got the comic out, right? And this one, they sure got the comic out, and it's not just legible, it is great, and then it's super famous.
Okay, I'll flip on to the next page. We've got the Hercules up the top in more detail, and then Snake Eyes making his leap. And I think I've got a couple of the panel details here. Yeah, so here's Snake Eyes in all of his glory, with all of the gear kitted out, and you know, when you're zoomed in at this close as well, you can see quite how I guess little. I'm trying to think of the correct word, but quite how, you know, how much can be done in the storytelling versus how little is kind of actually on the page for that Hercules, as it's kind of making its way of, you know, into the distance.
Economical.
I feel like in this era of decompressed storytelling that we've been in comics for, I don't know how long it's been, 20 odd years, that pages like this, I mean, I've seen many other pages that look and are laid out like this, but back in 1984, you didn't really see pages laid out like this, you know, where, you know, you had the action moving along incrementally in kind of symmetrical panels. I mean, you had a few artists, like, I mean, Frank Miller did some similar stuff with Daredevil. If you go back, you know, Krigstein at, you know, EC and stuff, but yeah, in kind of mainstream Marvel, you didn't really see this kind of layout much, at least not that I can recall.
That's a great point. Krigstein was Hama's teacher.
Oh, he was? I didn't even know that.
High school.
Wow.
But Mark, can you go back one slide to just the comparison? Because Gene, this is a really good point. In this most unusual G.I. Joe story ever, this is probably the most unusual G.I. Joe page, because so in his book Understanding Comics, Scott McCloud refers to 6 different kind of panel transitions, right? It's moment to moment, aspect to aspect, scene to scene, and 3 others. And he has examples for sort of what they are and what they mean. and this is moment to moment. And we might have like 3 panels in a G.I. Joe story where someone's like very slowly reloading their gun, or like they're like jumping and putting their sword away while they're like taking the pin off a grenade. And then in the next panel, they're flipping and letting go of the grenade. And then the next panel, they're on the other side of the wall and they're safe as the grenade blows up the bad guy. But yes, this is, I mean, visually, there's nothing in the background. Just purple. But I would put a burst on this page. I would just comp the burst from the cover, right? Like the most unusual G.I. Joe page ever. of all time. There's also a really nice arc. If you track Snake Eyes from panels 2 to 5, there's a curve as he goes just a little to the left and then more to the right, which helps to lead your eye from left to right, which not every panel and not every page has to do.
And in terms of leading our eye as well, sort of, we got Snake Eyes, heading directly down towards the castle. There's no doubt where he's going, and I think I've zoomed in on the castle again. So much storytelling there, and when you're zooming right in, there is so few lines. It's and it's just like these lines here. It's like, wow, it's just dots at this point.
Yeah, and those dots barely, the ones that aren't within the sort of confines of the castle itself, they barely even show up on the printed page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the first things I noticed when I saw the art in person was the economy of line. You don't really expect it, but when you hone in on it, like you've shown up here, you really see that how much they've done with so little.
Yeah.
Up next. Okay, we're down in the oubliette dungeon. We've got the famous miscoloring mistake in the bottom right hand corner. Let's call it out. So Storm Shadow has leapt up. He's replaced the manhole cover, and that is why then Scarlet is left in the dark, and has been recolored to fix that mistake in the most recent editions.
You want to put me full screen?
Go on, let's do it, Tim. Okay,
there we go.
solo.
There we go. Okay.
There we go. There's the recolored version, all one color.
Okay. This dungeon is such an unusual idea, because it's like half of a globe, right? Like that ladder, the sort of staples in the first panel that are above Storm Shadow, those are on the wall, but those like curve away. Like if you had your arms on the top ones, you would just be hanging. You wouldn't be able to, unless you had like hooks coming up from your toes, right? Like elf shoes. And I love the idea here that this may actually be something historical. Like Hama reads a lot and knows a lot about government and politics and military history. So there may be some castle or military base somewhere, somewhen, where it's like, oh yeah, they put their prisoners in the top half of the negative space of a sphere. This feels really visual in the way that a dungeon for the G.I. Joe animated series would feel really visual, in a way that I feel like when the Joes are captured by Cobra in the comics, it's not anything so fantastical. So as a visual like location, like the brainwave scanner as a device is fantastical, but like it's still just like a chair that you strap into. And this is this weird, like, can you scroll down a little bit, Mark? So they're on this like post, and then there's water, right? And it's like, does it fill up with water? Does all the water from the castle, like when it rains, does the water drain down here? If you leave someone there, are they going to drown? When I first read this issue, I didn't have all these questions actively running in my head, but I think in the back of my mind, I knew that there were lots of ways to die in this space.
Right.
And like Storm Shadow is such a badass and Cobra are the bad guys. And like Scarlet has got to get out of there soon.
And what's interesting is when you're zooming up this close, you can really see sort of some of the, I guess, the remnants of the tools being used. That up near the top of Scarlet's head, you can, I think, make out some pencil there, which would be from Larry's original breakdowns. You can see a difference in the, in the darkness of the black. There's this the plaster is sort of somewhat more faded, which is probably just the the colors changing over time. So that's been sort of done in a obviously a different medium to some of the rest of it. And we've got, I guess, hints at something that's a bit drier. I don't know if that's maybe, I don't know, is it dry brush or potentially charcoal or something? And we've also got hints of white in there as well, a bit of white out, creating sort of extra texture in the hair. What does it look like to you in person, Gene? Do you think that there's sort of charcoal or pencil or dark black pencil or something like that in some of these instances? Particularly, I think when Scarlet's hair is coloured.
I can't really tell. Yeah, the plaster is definitely a different medium. I can't tell if it's ballpoint or very thin marker.
I think
it might be ballpoint.
I think the Band-Aid is a pen with not a regular India ink. I think that ink is sort of more likely to fade faster.
Yeah.
I think everything about her hair is like regular India ink for inking.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not great at picking out brush versus like Crowquill pen. But her hair, I think, is brush, and her Band-Aid is, I think, like regular pen, maybe not even fancy drawing pen.
Right.
Something else that I'm thinking about old comics versus modern comics, and for all my complaining about modern coloring, there are many colorists in modern comics who do really gorgeous work that I love, and I will like keep or show to people. It's just that there are also many colorists in modern comics who don't have those abilities, and I think are sort of overwhelmed by Photoshop. But something else that has changed besides the style and the tools for coloring or the style for inking. Like nowadays in comics, all these lines, can you zoom back into panel 3? I guess panel 2 and 3, Mark? Nowadays, a lot of artists would not ink the lines on Storm Shadow's costume in that third panel the way that they are inked here. And many artists would not ink Scarlet's hair the same way. I think a lot of artists would leave those blank and let the colorist do the work. It's like, oh, well, there's a highlight, so that's going to be red and like an orange or a yellow or a white highlight, or like a red gradient that becomes orange. Whereas here, it's like, this is just going to be like percentage of yellow and a percentage of cyan that makes like a dull orange. And similarly, I feel like in the last 100 issues, when Storm Shadow shows up, the shading on him, when done in color, it's not done with a light blue, as it is on this page, as it would be in comics of the 60s and 70s and 80s. Mark, if you want to go back to the comparison slide, like this light blue that's acting as a shadow for Storm Shadow's white costume. Yeah. Like, I don't look at this and think like, oh, is Storm Shadow is his costume like half white and half blue? Did he fall into blue ink or did he fall into blue paint? My brain like reads this properly. It's like, no, that light blue is acting as a shadow for the white, even though based on like the yellow light above them, that's not necessarily what the color of the shadow would be. Like nowadays you do that in gray or like a brown or something, and and I really like this look.
Yeah.
I'm also noticing here in the inks, the detail of the inks, which sort of come across better. Come across, you can pick up the finer details on the original page. The skill here being employed to show Storm Shadow screaming in pain as his thumb is being bitten underneath a mask. That takes some drawing chops.
Mhm.
Yeah, and as a comparison, every single time that anyone has drawn Deadpool, like saying something or smiling or like making this open mouth in Marvel Comics in the last 15 years, I've thought, that's not what masks do. And here, Mark, you're absolutely right. Like, okay, this fabric, this ninja, like those like 15 or 20 little thin lines. Yes, that's what fabric does. That's like I see that mouth. That's great.
Excellent. Okie dokie. Next up. Okay, here we are up in Destro's study room. This is those smaller windows that were established on the opening splash page. What jumps out looking at the original art here is possibly the screens. So it's brown, and I think that's the remnants of glue. So I think what probably happened here was this underneath is how it was originally produced in black on white paint.
Yeah.
A stat was taken, the colors reversed,
Negative,
and then
yeah,
it was pasted on as the negative.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And yeah, I may even have one or both of those stats somewhere.
And then in the middle panel, right, something that nowadays is very easy to do in Photoshop, but in the 60s and 70s and 80s and in comics or in printing, I should say, was an extra step. If you're as the inker, if you wanted to tell the colorist where a color was going to meet another color and not have a black line between them as a natural barrier, you'd use a red pen to draw that shape or that outline or that barrier. And then in the gutter, this is a note from the inker to the colorist: remove red lines. And so when this artwork gets photographed, that red pen is going to show up as black, just like all the black ink around it, and it's going to print as black in the final comic, unless the red lines are removed in the copy in the next step or two. And you see this you see this in a lot of original art and covers. It's not that uncommon.
Yeah, so these red lines were there to kind of signal to the colorist that this is meant to be a reflection of Destro's monitors. So in panel 2, you can see there's a square monitor and a kind of circular one next to it. And so in the reflection in his mask, we've got a sort of square one central and then a circular one to the right. But unfortunately, this was, I think, coloring mistake number 3 that we know of in this particular issue, where that reflection wasn't created and apparently just wasn't picked. Some of these mistakes just weren't picked up just because of the pace of producing the book, that they maybe weren't spotted or weren't able to be.
Yeah, you see in the right margin, there's a little note that says "colorist note glow."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hama has been specific. He has said in that middle panel, you're supposed to see some of the lettering reflected.
Really? Even the lettering?
And I mean, based on sort of how small the lettering is and how sort of bad printing was in 1984 and how hard it would be with a brush for George Rousseau's, the colorist, to sort of like even indicate. I mean, you just get like a couple wiggly lines of green. But Hama has said, like, yes, you're supposed to see the letters like backwards in Destro's mask. And looking at it now, I think what we're supposed to see is a couple squiggly green lines in those 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 monitor shaped red lasso squares. Can you talk about the can we both read what's in the right margin on the bottom two panels, and then also can you tell us about the white splotches in the final panel? Don't
ink this panel. Call Milty.
Well, don't ink this. Don't ink this panel. Call Milty. That's Hama's handwriting. Huh. We should ask him.
And then on the left, it's in blue pencil or something. It says letter use computer type. Letter use computer type. So talking about the
Please let her look like computer lettering. Oh, so, that's above, and then what you said is below.
What's so? What are these two white smudges on the bottom?
That's a good question.
Did something get stuck to the art and get pulled off? Is this a tear, or is this like white out that got?
Yeah, I'm feeling it, and it feels more like a tear than white out. So I don't know what was there.
So something's.
I'm going to make a guess. I think possibly the panel above it might have come loose and then settled on this panel here, and then when it was removed, it might have taken away some of the paper. This very last panel.
That's a very good guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Gene, you said if you have the.
Yeah, I think I have. I want to say I have maybe the fourth panel somewhere. I don't have it handy. It'll be in an envelope stuck in a closet somewhere. But if I come across it, I will take a look at the back and see if
I'm going to change. I'm going to change my guess. Actually, I think that this might be from a different panel. I'm going to do a super zoom. Because all the way in, there is maybe not. I don't know. I was beginning to wonder, could this be like a circular balloon? Because it looks like there.
Oh, that looks like a word.
That looks like a word balloon. Yeah.
Hot damn, Mark! Wow. Oh, okay. So
is that stuck on the surface?
That looks like ink. There's no shadow. That's drawn.
That is stuck. That is a paste up. So that looks like a part of a paste up word balloon. It's
really
not
Sorry.
Drawn. Yeah.
Sorry, I stand corrected.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's my guess. Rick Parker, who lettered the first page because there is a title and there are credits, or someone. Here's my guess. Rick Parker letters this page because it's got the type on the screens. And in the scramble, I'm sorry, Rick Parker, I love your lettering. I'm not trying to say you made a mistake. I'm just saying, of any of the letterers who touched this issue, you're the one who's credited. So I think someone lettered this page and maybe sort of got their wires crossed for a moment, and maybe the type that is on the screen got put into a word balloon and stuck to this panel. And then someone said, wait, no, that's not dialogue. That goes, and that's the wrong panel anyway. Let me yank this off. But at the same time, if it got yanked off, then this splotch would have been corrected right on this art. This splotch would not have been corrected on a copy, unless the mistake was caught like one or two steps later when the art had already been photographed.
Or possibly just, when art is stored together, word balloons come loose. It might belong to another comic and just happen to land on this page, get stuck on, got pulled off at some point. We'll never know.
that would be a great question for Larry, or I don't know if Rick Parker is still around.
He is still around. He just got a gorgeous computer font a couple years, like 2 years ago, made out of his handwriting.
Okay.
I think he writes and draws though as blogging. He doesn't, and he lettered some of All Time America Comics a couple years ago, which was that like retro thing that Fantagraphics published, that like Benjamin Marra and I think Ed Piskor did. Anyway, it was supposed to look like Marvel comics from the 80s, and so they hired a Marvel letterer. Let's look at the next page.
Sorry, is this the same Rick Parker that famously drew the Marvel adaptation of Beavis and Butthead in the 1990s.
Yeah.
Must be, mustn't it? Yeah.
Yes, he also draws. He also cartoons, and he did some one panel gag strips in the bullpen bulletins page in the late 80s or early 90s. I should say Rick Parker is not credited. There's no credited letterer on page 1, but these letters, the credits on page 1 to me look like Rick Parker's handwriting, but I could be wrong.
Okie dokie, let's move on. So here we go. A lovely splash, half splash of Snake Eyes coming down on his parachute and landing on the top of the silent castle. There's a close up of that top half of the page. Yeah, what's striking is, all of the detail in the blacks in terms of how it was inked, and I guess trying to give the impression of that white being left behind to be potentially stars, but and some of that comes out on the finished page. You can see, but certainly not as much as what's on the original board.
So Marvel had this experimental streak in the 80s, and it gets us art like Bill Sienkiewicz on the New Mutants, and there are some storytelling and art ticks that I feel like in my reading of Marvel history, editor-in-chief Jim Shooter would have pushed back and said, okay, next time this has to be more traditional. And the background of this, I'm not saying, I haven't spoken to Jim Shooter. I'm not saying Jim Shooter did or didn't like this panel, but I look at this panel and I think this feels like the kind of panel that an editor after the fact would look at and say, oh, we really should have had the ink go all the way to the bottom border. That this is evocative of movement, and it does feel a little bit like speed lines, and it also does suggest stars. But at the same time, and I like this panel. At the same time, I feel like the traditional side of Marvel in the 80s would look at this panel and say, like, no, make that just completely black.
Right.
And then I'm really struck by the fourth panel of how gorgeous the inking is on the snake, that it is so clearly shiny, not just metal, but shiny metal. I guess it's in all three of those panels on the bottom, but particularly that last one. It's shiny metal and it is underlit, right? It's like, you look at Colossus and a bunch of X-Men comics, and it's like, okay, he's shiny, but there isn't always an indication in the inking of where the shadow is such that we know where the direction of the light source. And this is definitely an underlit metal snake.
And inspired a statue. This is from Diamonds a good few years ago now. I had it on my wall. My one has fallen off the wall a couple of times, so it's somewhat somewhat repaired. But yeah, the panel that inspired a statue. Next up, we're back in the dungeon with Scarlet making her escape with a bobby pin. The economy of the backgrounds again there, but the storytelling doing so much before we cutting back to Snake Eyes making his way down from the top of the tower. And,
layout of this page, 3 panels, a wide panel and 3 panels, also recalls a previous page or 2 that we've seen, and I can't help but see the Arashikage symbol in a page like this if I squint and turn my head a little side. Like I don't.
Wow.
I absolutely do not think that Hama was doing that on purpose. I absolutely do not think there is any connection. What I'm saying is, I see a similarity, and you could have like 15 people. It's like, okay, 15 people. I need you to lay out a 7-panel page for me. And like more than half of them would like settle on something like this, and they're not all like embedding it with G.I. Joe meaning. Also, at the time that Hama is laying out this page, I don't think he's invented the symbol yet, because that comes a couple pages later, and he is making this up as he goes. But I look at this page and the previous one, and I think, that sort of looks like something.
Yeah.
But I appreciate your ooh and ah when I said that.
we can also make out a lot more in the original art here compared to the printed page. I mean, just sort of, the printing technologies of the time, and some of the fine detail getting slightly lost. I'm thinking particularly about Snake Eyes on the left, beautifully inked to stand out against from the night sky, and some of that subtlety slightly lost in as it appears on the printed page. Okay, we saw Destro with his chess set just by his window earlier, so we know we're back in Destro's study, or whatever he wants to call it, and looking at his chess set. The players are on the board are some of the key characters. The ones to the side are the ones that have recently died in the issue or are presumed to be dead, and at this point Baroness had been involved in an explosion, so is presumed by Destro to actually be dead. You can see a lot of Larry's fingerprints on the look of Destro in this. He sort of draws Destro slightly differently to other artists, and then finishing with some beautifully rendered feet and that distinctive dungeon lid. Meaning that we're immediately brought back to where we now are back in the scene.
Now, was an actual model or chess set ever created in this manner? I'm not familiar with one, but
not as
I hear
licensed.
That Larry.
No,
I hear that Larry lobbied for it, but it didn't happen.
I imagine a fan or two has made this, but there's nothing official.
Okay.
This is another.
Why hasn't this happened, Hasbro? Please come have a G.I. Joe chess set.
Who made the Snake Eyes statue from the previous page? Was that Diamond? Did you say?
I think that was Diamond. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Diamond. It's a G.I. Joe set. I mean, the problem with a G.I. Joe set is like, who do you make the pawn for the Joes? Like, I don't want green guys, green shirts. Anyway, looking at this page, the first panel, like, okay, so this is one of those rules that you can break if you're talented or confident, or if you're still learning and you break it, it sometimes gets you into trouble. So Destro is centered here. And, in film composition and in illustration composition and in comics, there's something called the rule of thirds, which is if you have a rectangular composition, the sort of most interesting places are 1/3 of the way across, 2/3 of the way across, 1/3 of the way down, 2/3 of the way down. And like all rules, this rule is meant to be broken. When my students break it, I will say, don't break this yet. You're still learning. When a professional who's like drawn a couple dozen comics and has like been published in magazines puts the bad guy centered in the top panel and puts the center line of the chess set on the center line of the panel, and then it continues to swoop down and bisect the Baroness in the second panel, and there is the panels 2 and 2 and 4, they're not any kind of symmetry, right? It's like I've got a hand on a chess set and then I've got a big head looking down. But at the same time, in terms of like the sort of emotional, in terms of like time and the pause of like taking a breath, in terms of the amount of story told, they match. And then on the bottom panel, Mark, can you scroll down a little more? Thank you. That center line somewhat just about lines up with the front edge of Storm Shadow's. I mean, what you really have is Storm Shadow on the right half of that panel, and not Storm Shadow where he's going or where he's checking on the left half of that panel. So, again, like drawing characters and objects straight on. When you do it in 8th grade, it's because you can't draw 3-point perspective. When you do it at this level, it's because you are half saving time and half like making visually interesting decisions.
Wow.
Let's see what we got next. Storm Shadow is opening up the lid to the dungeon to look in, and is caught unawares by Scarlet. Him, a ninja, you know. Surely not such a thing isn't possible. Who knows? Who knows why he was opening it up? You know, possibly. You know, as a retcon, we know that he's basically a good guy, right? So, don't know.
Yeah. So you just to put a point on this, Mark, you're saying maybe he's going to let her go or see how she's doing.
Could be. I mean, at this point, he's a villain, so maybe we're, you know, projecting some nefarious kind of.
He's going to go interrogate. I think when I first read this, I wasn't asking questions.
Not too many issues later, we've got the trial of Cobra Commander's son Billy, and Storm Shadow breaks him out, right? So who knows?
I think when I first read this as a kid, I wasn't asking any questions, so I took it at face value. Like Storm Shadow's checking on Scarlet.
Yes.
And the previous panel of just his feet asks a bit of a question, right? Which is sort of the audience, like, how is Scarlet doing? It's like, let's check in on the bobby pin. Like, has she gotten out, or did she drown? This page, that these 6 panels are all the same size, suggests the rhythm with which you're supposed to read this page, which is like da 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 da. It can be faster, but it's that even keel where, you know, in comics, if you have smaller panels, this sort of like emphatic suggestion is that you read them faster, that we take them in and then we move on to the next panel. And if you have a very big panel, the reader stops to take it all in, right? If you turn the page and there's a full page, if you turn the page and there's a double page splash, you stop and you take a breath and you look around. And if you have a lot of smaller panels, it's like editing in a film, right? If you have shots that take up less time, your cuts are happening more often, and you're increasing the rhythm of your edit of your scene. And this is an action scene, right? So there's a bigger panel of Destro just looking at the chess set and going, And there's a bigger panel of Storm Shadow's feet in front of the manhole cover, right? And then like da 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 da, wham!
Got great consistency in the storytelling as well, because Scarlet has got this, you know, swollen eye, and you know, just one of those things that's easy to lose track of throughout the course of a story. But you know, it's you know, it's there every time we come back to her. And that last panel, just that swoop of the lid coming down on Storm Shadow, just so evocative. You know, such a great sense of action and sort of really clobbering him and his open fingers as it connects. And Magnus is joining the live stream. Good to have you on board, Magnus. If you're not aware, guys, Magnus has made an incredible Lego recreation of the Silent Castle. So please do a Google, pop up, have a look.
I just want to point out one thing in the second to last and the third to last panel here. The lines on Scarlet's gloves on her left hand on this bottom panel, which is the seam where you sew the top half of a glove to the bottom half of the glove. And that's what says that this is fabric. She's wearing a glove, as opposed to, you know, the shorthand for like ninja, bare hand, fingernails. So that's the detail more than the more than the Band-Aid and the black eye. That's the detail here I love in panels 4 and 5.
That. Excellent. Good. And there again.
Yeah, the one you're circling right now, particularly.
Yeah, good good observation, because without those kind of little markers, you could quite easily, particularly in the black and white, sort of think, is that skin, and potentially lead to coloring mistakes. Yeah. Next page up, we're back at the top of the battlements. We know that because we can, tell those sort of very typical sandcastle-esque battle, up and downs, the right angles forming the battlements as Snake Eyes has taken out a Cobra Trooper with the night vision goggles. Lovely little details there. He's laid his Uzi on to one side and his rope to another. And as the troopers sort of bear down on him, he's moving quick with the dagger to take the two of them out. And the speed lines there that are employed, really suggesting this pace of movement for Snake Eyes to take these two guys out.
All right, so the 1982 Snake Eyes toy has a dagger or a knife on his left suspender, right? So the one that we'd see on the right. And so,
okay, his chest.
Yes. So are we cheating this a little bit, that like he has that dagger from just sort of somewhere on his costume, or is it definitely from that his left suspender?
I don't know. It must have been shown somewhere. I'm going to flick back. I can't spot it. It on
well, here would be under, when he's parachuting in, it would be under the
the parachute on his front.
Okay. Well, I guess it's the.
I mean, if it's there on the toy.
Yeah, Deus Ex Dagger. Dagger Ex Machina.
Yeah, and a slap, atomic slap as he brings down the guy who doesn't get the dagger. And a great little detail that I noticed in the original art here is just that kind of, I don't know, would you call it a webbing or something? The material on the inside of the helmet, that allows it to sit plush, and it's not just metal against head. Great little touch, just really sort of bringing it to life and sort of making it into more of a real world kind of
and another inking choice technique from another era in these final two panels. Snake Eyes is moving so fast, none of the normal black of his costume is inked as spot blacks. It's all internal speed lines, as if he's Quicksilver or the Flash. Like that's I don't mean this like he's magic, he's a mutant like lightning. I mean sort of generically, like this is a special effect. And George Rousseau's colors Snake Eyes in those two panels with a light blue, not with the darker blue with some magenta in it of the earlier panels on this page, to sort of add to this effect of, you almost can't see him. You almost see through him. He's moving so fast.
And again, another aspect where, some of that fine detail is just lost a little bit in the reproduction here. So, the fine details of Snake Eyes' mask, the little slits on his, just below his goggles and so on, just not quite able to be reproduced. We'll see it a bit later on, Tim. I was just going to note that while Snake Eyes is drawn quite black in this particular panel that we're looking at the moment, across the book there's a fair few panels where he is drawn very open for the colorist to fill in the detail
right
in their stage.
As for that color panel you just zoomed in on, where we're losing the detail, it does depend on the printed comic book you have. I don't mean like reprint versus first print. I mean of the 300,000 copies of issue 21 out there, the plastic printing plate that strikes the newsprint, that wears out over time. Sometimes it's
Right.
slightly out of alignment. There's a little bit more ink on it. So everyone's copy is going to be a little bit different. And to overgeneralize, someone's copy that comes from the beginning of the print run versus someone's copy that comes at the end of the print run is going to look different. So if you're really interested in seeing how well this particular panel reproduces, Mark, you should buy several more copies of issue 21.
They're so cheap at the moment as well.
The first printing.
That, in the 30th anniversary reproduction with the more modern techniques, you see that it has reproduced a lot more clearly like the original.
Gene, do you have
from that version?
Gene, do you have a favorite page or favorite moment?
Like many, it's got to be the. Let me see here. Either the last page or the second to last page. I mean, the way should we talk about it now or when we get there?
Should we get to it? When we get to it.
Let's go a little faster so that we do get there.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because I could spend an hour on every page.
Yeah, here we go. So next up, we've got Destro leading the troops to the battlement. Some great shortcutting here with the troops zigzagging their way up. Again, just hints at all of these tops of heads. We've got a good sense of place because of the sandcastle battlements, so we know exactly where they're going. You don't need it labeled out. And this panel here in the middle is almost an exact mirror of one that we saw earlier on in the story, with that particular shot, but with the added inclusion of a somewhat surprised Cobra Trooper making his way past the window. With the Uzi, Snake Eyes' Uzi following after,
which sets up such a. I mean, there's so many levels of badassery here with Snake Eyes until he needs to get rescued. But I know he can do this mission without his Uzi, but he loses his Uzi, so he's going to have to do this mission without his Uzi. That's a cool, problem to give him. Halfway through the issue.
Uzis. Yeah, I've zoomed in on this last panel again, just an example of some of that fine detail, at least on this version, Tim, not quite making its way through. And you can really see some of the tools coming into play. We've got a little bit of white out there in the bottom, sort of contributing to some of the sheen in Snake Eyes' visor. What's up next? Okay, back at back just above the dungeon. Storm Shadow has made his way out. The manhole covers open. He's got his ninja friends hanging out. They're coming down, and sort of we're able to tell them apart because they've got different weaponry: the sword, the sai, the sickle, and the ball and chain. There are different doorway to the one at the top of the stairs because this is squared off. It's not the one at the stairs immediately above the dungeon, so it's a different part of the castle.
I remember when I read this issue the first time, I thought, because I was reading issues out of order, and I don't know how aware I was of the Red Ninjas, and I thought, oh, these three guys are going to beat up Storm Shadow. And I turned the page, like, oh, they're his trainees.
Trainees on the job training. Yeah, they've got their special hand. They've got their special kind of hand.
Yeah, I love that panel 3 because it's very evocative of that scene in I think it was 1981, 82, the movie Revenge of the Ninja, when Shoko Sugi's character and Arthur, I forget the actor's last name, are about to square off in their final rooftop battle. They do all these ninja hand signs, and I'm pretty sure that's one of them that they do. So I think that is actually done with some degree of research and accuracy.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's also cool. It's also just cool for a 9-year-old.
Yeah,
doing-
of course, of course the ninjas are gonna be upside down like bats as
Like
they're
bats,
meditating, ready getting into for the next thing.
Something else that
Okay.
has fallen out of favor. All these speed lines on the previous page when the ninjas jump down.
Mhm.
On this page, as Scarlet's swinging the chain. Artists tend not to draw speed lines in comics as much as they used to, and in some cases at all.
So it's Scarlet sort of skulking around, trying to make her escape. She comes across the two Cobra troopers who have been carrying this Cobra claw since about page 2 of the story. Where are they going?
I think part of the story is that the freight elevator is broken, which makes all of Snake Eyes is getting from the top to the middle to the bottom that much more impressive. Can you just imagine on page 2, where Cobra Commander is pointing, take it away,
Remember, the freight elevator is broken. Take the claw to sub-level 15 by hand. You two.
Or he just said, "Take it away," and they're like, "Where's away? I don't know. We'll keep on carrying this thing around the building until we figure out."
Can you zoom in on the right side of panel 1? I've always wondered what is this? Okay, it's some communications. It's a video game. Okay,
it's Pac-Man.
it's just cool.
It's
Okay.
futuristic-y stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Snake Eyes, hands on his hips.
You know what? We should license this panel as a shirt. Just this panel, and then under it, just the 3 letters HUH with a period. And there's no word. It's not a word balloon. He's not saying it aloud because he can't talk. It's just an emotional state. Huh.
I came all this way. So again, speed lines, so suggestive. Internal speed lines. I like that description, Tim. And then that action whop against his head like that, and we can skip past this in the printed page, but here that head isn't drawn at all. It's just an explosive impact that's created by the lack of the inks that's fleshed out there. It's just so kinetic, and then the manhole cover is brought down on the Red Ninja off panel, leaving the level of violence purely to our own imagination. And
it's worse. It's worse
and
that way.
In the era of comic code, you can't show a Red Ninja's skull disintegrating with bits of brain flying off. So we just have to imagine that particular aspect.
Let's play a quick game. Can each of you think of the sound effect for that final panel that if you were lettering this comic that you would want to put on this panel? Okay.
Blood.
How do you spell that?
SPLUDD.
Okay. Gene?
I'm just gonna go with a flat out splat.
Splat with SPLAT.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm hearing less liquid, and it's just more the impact of I'm going to call it concrete manhole cover. For me, it's a whack.
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 Okay.
Yes, it's a classic.
My runner-up pick was Thwam.
Thwam.
THWAMM.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting the mixture of the impact on the body, but also the concrete on that hard floor.
You know what?
Suggestions? What are your suggestions? Put them in the comments below.
I think
subscribe.
People have turned this issue into like a stop motion animation with toys or with motion graphics of these panels. There's this there's this Lego model of the Silent Castle. I think what I want to do is I think I want to just add sound effects to this story. All not necessary, and it might ruin the issue, but as sort of an artistic exercise in both writing and also lettering and editorializing, really. Because I'm also looking at that third to last panel, and I think that's a wok or a wom. Wok would be W-O-K.
And then after that, we can just add thought bubbles to all the Snake Eyes panels, right? Because it's missing that as well. So
you know what? Just the cover. The word, his thought balloon is.
Okay, what we got next? So with the ninja crushed underneath the manhole cover, Snake Eyes is working his way up the stairs. And in a moment that I believe was inspired by Indiana Jones against that swordsman in the market, he's chucking a grenade, which says grenade on it to avoid any doubts, with that glorious look in the eyes from that ninja as it lands against his thigh, and he's kind of realizing what is about to happen. If this were a regular issue, we might have an error detected here, because apparently, and this is again sourcing from Mark Bellamo's commentary, that this has got M1A grenade against it, and apparently it's an M26 lemon grenade, so called because it is sort of size, slight colorization of a lemon, and it doesn't have the same sort of ridges as the pineapple type grenades. Tim, Gene, anything to add?
No, other than that is definitely one of my top 5 favorite panels in the book.
This these last 2 panels
/ history
here,
of comics.
Right.
G.I. Joe as a comic, it's pretty often fun. It's occasionally very funny, and this panel is very funny, and in that way, it's unusual.
And next up, here we go. That was I noticed as I was looking in the detail that we've got in the goggles of Snake Eyes' mask here. We have a reflection of the Red Ninja, and I think we can see that in the original art. It is there. Here we go. But in the black and white and looking at the detail, it's much more obvious. Next up, what a bold top panel. It's just the lines suggesting the explosion and those sighs flying away with that brilliant effect of just sort of capturing that 3D impact of that massive burst of light by just illuminating the shadow on one side of the sigh.
In panel 2, there are pieces of rock or a wall, and
or ninja.
well, yeah. I mean, I think based on not just the comics code as sort of the rules for what kind of gore or violence or blood you can show, but just sort of the shorthand of this story. No, the ninja's been evaporated. There is nothing left of the ninja, and we're just going to move on. Hama is showing us only what we need to see. It's we saw an explosion, so Snake Eyes is going to keep going up those stairs. This big panel here where he's in the doorway and the other ninja and Storm Shadow are on the other sides of him. I can imagine a thought balloon here with for Snake Eyes.
Can you, Gene? Can you work out what it says just to the right of Storm Shadow? It's quite faded.
Right.
Is it pointing out which one's in red and which one's in white?
Makes sense.
It's just too faded. Yeah, I can't make that out.
Maybe it says no blood splatter on wall behind Snake Eyes.
Oh yes, you're right. No, I've zoomed right in. There's Storm Shadow.
Oh, it says there's
Storm
Storm Shadow? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Storm Shadow on the right, as per your guess.
Cool.
I think one of those things where using digital tools might even be easier than just looking at the actual object gene.
Right.
When it's that zoomed in, I think with a really good magnifying glass, you might be able to, and the right light, you probably can work it out.
If our viewers are sort of curious why, it's like isn't it obvious which is the Red Ninja and which is Storm Shadow? Like, shouldn't the colorist know? The colorist is, I think, very rarely looking at the script.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're usually just coloring what's in front of them, and the colorist is going to rely on the penciler to point out key stuff that they're likely to miss, because the colorist is not rushing, but if there's any deadline crunch, it's like, well, if the writer took too long, or the penciler took too long, or in this case, if Hasbro took too long to approve something and get back to it, it's like it all gets squeezed on the colorist and the letterer. And so if you're coloring, I don't know, 3 pages a day, 5 pages a day, you're doing it very quickly, and you're not necessarily like reading the story and asking yourself logical questions. Like, if you see something on fire, okay, orange and yellow. But if you just see a bunch of ninjas, you might just, even though the guy's got bare arms, right? You might just, in a rush, color both these ninjas red. Right. And so in a lot of original art, it's like if you're on a submarine or an airplane, it's like all red or all green because that's the lighting. But it's sometimes like, this is Wolverine. Like, okay, that one's Wolverine. Okay.
And also in this instance, the colorist will literally be rushing as well. To be fair.
Yes. Yes.
They probably need a little bit more help than they might otherwise need, and some great acting as well from the characters. Larry describes sort of acting out the motions of these action sequences, so he can think about where their body will be going, and where, in this case, Storm Shadow's had a downstroke, and he needs to then swing back up from the ground to get to Snake Eyes. And in this sequence, we're beginning to sort of see the hints of the damage that this is having on their costumes. Mm-hmm. So there's the rip there on Snake Eyes' costume, and in this panel here, Storm Shadow's bandages are beginning to come loose, and sort of tracking out over the next few panels and pages, is sort of progressively becoming more unraveled.
Can I point something out? Can you zoom in to panel 4, Mark?
Okay. Yep.
So Hama came and talked at my school 8 or so years ago, and he walked us through. Sorry, can you go higher? The second to last panel.
Sorry.
Thanks. And he like did his reading of Silent Interlude to my students as a lecture in comic storytelling, and he said something which is totally fascinating to me, and that is that I can't remember who he learned this from. I don't think it's Wally Wood. It might be Krigstein, but forgive me. But Hama, when he lays out, he draws the head, hands, and feet of a character. Mm-hmm. And then he works out the anatomy. Then he draws the torso, the legs, and the arms, and the neck to connect them. Mm-hmm. And you can only do that if you know anatomy, right? If you actually can draw like realistic people in perspective, like in contorted poses. But like a lot of people draw, and the way that I would teach my students to draw is you start with a line of action, a gesture. You start with a line that represents the spine or the idea, the force, the vector of the pose. Maybe you start with the head, and then you build out from there, from the spine, the major body masses, head, torso, pelvis, then the arms and legs, then the hands and feet. And I look at these 3 panels right here, and it is apparent to me that Hama drew first, head, hands, and feet. And he said the reason that he does this is that then he knows he can fit everything in. Because otherwise, if you draw the head and like a swoosh for what the body's doing, then you might like run out of space, and suddenly you need to make your panel wider or taller. And if you're saying like, well, Tim, Snake Eyes' head is cropped a little bit in that middle panel, yeah, that's an interesting choice. That's not a mistake or a problem, right? Same thing as how his fingers are slightly cropped at the top of that. But like, look at these first two panels. How, like, this is Hama as an artist who's drawing a panel has really good instincts, and that he fits in these three poses like just enough to get the sense of this red ninja collapsing on the floor awkwardly, but you can still like completely compose completely clearly behind two other guys that are fighting, right? And then in the second panel, and then in the third panel, this really, here's this B word again, this really bold, gorgeous composition, this really strong composition, these two horizontal, these rectangles from the doorway, but also the panel itself, but then the echo from under Storm Shadow's arm, like the framing he creates around Snake Eyes, that we see enough of the sword, and that there's just enough of this pose and the acting in like 0.5% of Storm Shadow's face and skin and body, right? Like all we get is him just looking one way with his eyebrow furrowed and his hand up, like, I'm gonna get him. These three panels, I think they're becoming some of my favorite panels in all of comics.
Wow.
As I've thought about this issue over the years.
You know, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and here's an example of where Snake Eyes has just been left very open, in mostly in white, apart from the boots. Yeah, I was just going to call that out just because it was something that I'd mentioned earlier on. Sorry, Gene, pick up.
No, I was going to say that, you know, I have looked at this art countless times. I've read the story countless times, and I just feel like from this conversation, I'm seeing things that I've never seen before, and I really appreciate it. I mean, I'm definitely getting a lot out of this conversation.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Going back to that first panel, right? Like, okay, so if we all grabbed a pencil, sorry, I mean the second panel of the page.
That's right.
So if we all grabbed a pencil and we got like 10 of our friends and like 5 professional artists that we knew, and had everyone draw a single panel with 3 ninjas fighting, right? But it sort of has this like, well, someone's collapsing and someone's like bracing and someone's assaulting from on high. A lot of the solutions would be great. And some of the solutions would be amazing and sublime, and some of them would be terrible. But like the balance here, it's like, okay, the negative space between Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes' leg, just enough for the Red Ninja's weapon. And then the negative space above Storm Shadow's, his right calf, and below his right calf, right? Perfectly fits the sickle, right? And like, so good. Good fighting, good fight choreography, good visual storytelling from panel to panel, good compositions within a panel. And there's even a progression from high to low, right? Like see Snake Eyes high in the first panel, a little bit lower in the second panel, and then lowest in the third panel. So there's even a diagonal line that it is subtly leading you down to him running. And like, again, that's not necessary. I think people who are really good at comics, I think they tend not to plan that. I think it just happens from practice and confidence and just an innate sense of like shaping a page, dividing a dividing a panel.
And sense of place here again, the very bottom panel, Snake Eyes is now at the bottom of the back of the castle. I think these longer windows are meant to mirror the ones on the front. We know we're at the back because we've got the radar emplacement and gun emplacement here facing away. So we're at the back, new location. where he's hailing a ride for his escape.
I believe the thought balloon is, huh?
Yeah,
Sorry.
typical.
So in this upper right panel with Snake Eyes, there's actually I don't know if you want to turn the focus on the camera, but on the back of the page.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I don't know if he drew the front first and then traced in back here, or if he drew it in the reverse on the back and used that to create the silhouette on the front.
Huh. So he could have maybe drawn this and then put it on a light box and gone over it on the.
Yeah, that's my guess.
Nice.
Yeah.
Why, that page is worth even more now. Mark, can you go back?
Interesting. I just wonder. I wonder why.
Mark, can you go back to the pages?
Oh, sorry. Yep. Here we go.
These two panels. I've also, Hama is so affiliated with G.I. Joe and other series that he's written, and the number of comics that he's drawn is very low compared to the number of comics that he's written. And it's in these two panels of Scarlet that I can really see his style. It's like just how he draws.
Put in that close up of Scarlet there.
Yeah.
Just such a great panel. And her eye is sort of gradually beginning to heal up a little bit. She's able to open it. I guess in part because of that moment of shock where she's seeing Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow raising his sword ready to throw it.
Do you guys think that in that third panel, Snake Eyes doesn't see Storm Shadow, right?
It doesn't look like it, does it?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay.
No.
So her calling out to him, that's like look out and gasp and oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But that's very much like look out.
Yeah.
I love the sort of desperation is too strong, but the anger of Storm Shadow's pose in that third panel. One hand is on the other side of the doorway, one leg is on the other side. He's sort of staggering through, right? But he's got that sword. There's such menace.
Okay. Storm Shadow throws his sword, and Snake Eyes reaches around Scarlet to grab it and then throw it behind him. It was something that it was a sequence that was homaged in an issue of Action Force where they did something very similar.
So
great,
this page
great shot
and the final page that follows are my two favorites in the book. I mean, I love. The technique that Snake Eyes, he grabs the blade, flips it over. You see that kind of, sandwiching your hands around a sharp blade in the ninja movies of the era. So that was very cool to me. But also the fact that Scarlet would potentially sacrifice herself to save Snake Eyes here. And then, as it turns out, he saves her from the blade. It just all works for me.
Yeah, she's resigned to it, isn't it? In this first panel, that's the bottom left-hand panel. You can see in her face, she's got her eyes closed, clenched, ready to take the blade.
Is that middle panel a stat?
No, this is all drawn art. It's not only not a stat. It's not a paste up or anything.
What's tell us about those 6 arrows? Move panel up.
Have they cut out this page at all and sort of just moved up the panel on the back of the page?
So
does it look
not
like
a paste up, but they have glue taped in, as you can see, they've taped in that panel.
There we go.
Yeah.
So maybe it was composed a little bit lower, and then they wanted it to line up with the first panel. So
that
they
would make
it out
sense.
and moved it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would have to do with like how much of the sword do we want to see, or are we like cropping the bottom of the sword, or it's like, do we want the eye levels to match up with the previous panel?
Yeah, it
then
looks
the third panel is a little bit.
There we go.
Yeah, because in the third panel, their eye lines are lower because we need the headroom to show the sword.
Right.
Yeah, it looks like. Here we go. The pen. The line was probably originally there. You can kind of see the remnants of a blue line at the bottom of the border, and it's kind of been lifted up to give us a tiny bit more in that panel.
And I guess in panel 3, I've always wondered, what is Storm Shadow thinking here? I mean, obviously it is not intending to kill Scarlet here, but I mean, does he feel remorse, or I mean, I don't know what is going on in his head. I mean, obviously he's quite surprised, but I've always wondered what exactly his thoughts are at that moment in time.
Looks like perhaps like it's almost like he's surprised by her coming down, and it's like that blade was meant for Snake Eyes, and shock horror. I'm going to kill a girl, something along those lines.
And yet, as Mark said earlier, right, Storm Shadow is on his way to becoming a good guy.
Good guy, yeah.
And but also Hama makes this up as he goes. So that panel may only this panel of him looking, panel 3, may only contain the reaction and the meaning that it needs to for a later issue when Hama decides it meant something. Because you could take this panel and a couple issues later, Storm Shadow's like, that sword was meant for you, Snake Eyes, but I would have gladly taken your friend. But you stop the sword. Next time I'll take you both out, right? Like, like Hama uses the term retcon. Like he says, and I think like when he's at a convention and he answers this question, even though like sort of everyone knows what retcon means, I feel like with G.I. Joe, it's actually a little confusing. He's like, well, the whole thing was written as retcon. Right? It's like, wait, what? And what he's saying is, since I made it up as I went along, if Storm Shadow did something, for example, good early on, that may have just been because I didn't know what to do at that moment, or I wanted to create an opportunity for later, or I made a mistake. And then later on, it's like, oh, well, he was starting to be a good guy. So that's where that starts. It's like, that's retroactive continuity.
But like I've heard, I've heard the question, why did Scarlet, have that plaster on her face at the beginning of the story? And he's like, well, I don't know, maybe there was a scuffle beforehand, but also if she's got that on her face, maybe I can do something with that later on. If I put something there, I can make something of it later on, not necessarily knowing what that thing meant at the time. Sort of the kind of making it up as I go along kind of way of retconning things. Yeah.
And I think retconning or retroactive continuity as a term for the G.I. Joe comic can be confusing because we sort of think of that as like more sci-fi or time travel or like mutants, right? It's like, it's like, okay, well, Wolverine didn't have claws until like the Weapon X story when he was given metal on his bones and claws. And so any flashback before that, he didn't have claws. And then once in 2001, you say that he always had bone claws, then you either ignore all the stories, which Larry Hama wrote one of, right? Where Logan and Ben Grimm are in World War II and Wolverine has the like Storm Shadow version 2, like ninja claws, right? So you either ignore those stories and you sort of pretend they didn't happen, or you retconned it away. It's like, well, Wolverine didn't know he had bone claws because he'd never been like backed into a corner, or like, well, you'd write some story where like, oh yeah, my hands used to itch and I didn't know why. It's like, that's retcon, and that's not like Marty McFly saving his mom after all in the second movie or something. That's like, it's just like, writing forwards and explaining things after the fact. Before I was talking about like sometimes the boldest angle is a straight view or a profile, and these first two panels here are a good example of that. Like if you have a high schooler and they're like trying to learn how to draw, and you're like, okay, draw me a ninja throwing a sword, they're probably going to want to draw this, but then they know that this is boring and not exciting, so they're going to draw something at an angle but actually, this is the boldest composition to throw a sword at someone. Perfect profile, these two panels.
And here we are, the final page, the grand conclusion.
We should just give the mic. We should just give the mic to Gene. Sorry, Mark. You should continue You should finish your sentence, and then Gene should just talk.
No, you'll never know. You'll never know, Tim.
Go on, Gene.
Tell us about this page.
Well, it's the grand reveal. I mean, it's all. I just love the three panels. The third panel is actually also taped in. And when I was reading this, when we were all reading this for the first time, there was no reason. I mean, there's really no clues in the rest of the story that the two are linked in any manner. And then, wow, I mean, this is how it ends. The last two panels, boom, boom, tattoo, and and then it ends. And yeah, it just leaves you wanting to know more, which is set up later in, I think, issues 26-7 or 7-8. And
that's right.
It's and I love the kind of the defiant pose on Storm Shadow at the end, and in that middle panel, the great close up and the perspective there. It's just a beautiful page.
Yeah, that final panel of Storm Shadow as well. That's looks so simple, but there's so much that you can try and read into it in terms of what's that pose, that expression mean, and with the tattoos reveal as well. It's sort of sets up so many ideas in the reader's mind.
Previously, I referred to matching eye lines or sort of a descending angle, like snake eyes from one panel to the next. And here, it's not the eye lines that line up, it's the tattoo that lines up. They're about the same size on these two panels, and they are on a matching horizontal. So there's this another added layer of meaning that connects them. So that line on the bottom where Storm Shadow's ankles are. So was this just drawn like a little too low on the page? And they're like, wait, let's cut it out and move it up a centimeter so it like fits at the right top and bottom. Is that what it is?
I'm not sure. I mean, you see those arrows at the bottom.
And on the side it says move panel up.
Move panel up.
Yeah. We've got a blue line just sort of cutting across Storm Shadow's feet. So I think that must have been where the panel originally finished.
I see. Yeah, right.
To cut it out and allow, because probably on the original page he extended it out and the feet were down there or something.
Down, right.
Yeah,
that would make sense.
This is the kind of thing where if you're drawing nowadays on the computer, you just lasso it and move it, or you draw it and then you're like, oh, this hand is a little too big. I need to make this hand 10% smaller. Well, I'm going to scan the page tomorrow and send it to my editor. I'll make that small adjustment in Photoshop, and forever the hand will just be a little too big on the original art. But, at Marvel in the 80s, this kind of stuff, you might like make a stat of the panel and like shrink it by 20% because your word balloon is going to cover up too much, or you might need to flop something left, right, or you might need to, in this case, just move the art and not make any kind of copy. Go for it.
I had a couple of other little sort of Easter egg nuggets here. So we've got the I Ching being used here, sort of the reveal, and that hexagram tattoo was previously used on Lei Kung the Thunderer in the Iron Fist stories that Larry had drawn not too long previous to this, and this particular hexagram very similar to the one used in Iron Fist. Hexagram 63, before completion, chosen because it was easy to remember is the answer that was given. And my other little Easter egg was this fractal explosion happening in that first panel where the claw sort of launches away from the pad, and it's this kind of unusual square blocky explosion. And apparently Larry was inspired by the work that Mike Golden had recently done in Star Wars issue 38, which was published August 1980, which kind of had this same kind of blocky fractal explosion effect being used. Again, source Mark Bellamo for that particular observation.
And then Arthur Adams uses that blocky explosion a lot,
of course, yeah.
in Long Shot and New Mutants after this.
So I hadn't put that together before.
In this first panel, behind the claw, it's purple, or it's lavender, and I read that as sky, and then there's white. Do you read that as one of the mountains?
Ooh,
because I've always just actually not really seen it as what it is. I've just treated it as a balance for Storm Shadow on the right side of the page, so the page doesn't hang one way or the other. And if it's a coloring mistake, if it's supposed to be green because it was on the first page, I don't have a problem with that. In the back of my mind, it sort of feels like snow because we are in mountains. But A, it's nighttime, and B, have you guys sort of thought about that white in the first panel?
Not before, but looking at it now, I'm thinking like just an inverted silhouette, that this is probably meant to be the mountain behind it, and and stylistically, just to make those fine fractal explosions pop, that works so much better against white than it would black, or another color. One
of the reasons why, so Snake Eyes' costume now on action figures and in movies, this comes from the Devil's Due era. Snake Eyes' costume now has the symbol on his shoulder, and I don't like that, because I can see why Hasbro is into it, because otherwise it's a little harder to copyright the visual of the character, because it's just a guy in black, even if you've got some signifiers like the visor or a certain arrangement of gear on his torso. But I feel like you wouldn't, it's like, even in the newest issue of the comic, right? Like in the flashback, Storm Shadow is covering the tattoo. He's not advertising. And I feel like in any G.I. Joe story, Snake Eyes shows up, and we should learn later, at the end of the first movie, in halfway through the second movie, in the second season, whatever it is, any G.I. Joe story that starts and continues, we should unravel Snake Eyes' backstory. And if from the very beginning, this thing is on his shoulder, everyone's going to go, that must mean something. Yeah. And I want, like, moviegoers who see these live action movies to experience some version of how readers experienced it, where he's just in black, he doesn't talk. And over time, it doesn't have to happen with the ninja, it doesn't have to happen in a castle. But over time, things get revealed. And so I actually don't ever like seeing that symbol on his shoulder, even when it's really well drawn by a wonderful cover artist.
Very good. So that was the last page, and all of the whole issue covered in somewhat of a detail. Sort of great to plow through. I hope you got something out of that, Gene, and I hope audience enjoyed it as well on their multiple watches, of course.
Hey, and I, as I mentioned, kind of as we were setting this up, I do have a kind of a thematically similar bonus page from G.I. Joe Yearbook number 3, another wordless story. Tim, I don't know if you've got your page handy, but
I picked on the spot now.
Well, yes, you talk, I'll grab it.
I picked this up last year. This is actually, aside from the issue 21, this is actually the only other piece of G.I. Joe art that I own. I actually own some kind of memorabilia from the 60s, and as I mentioned, a bunch of the new toys from the classified line and whatnot. But in terms of original art, this is actually the only other piece that I own, and I thought it made a nice companion piece to the 21. So was happy to buy this last year.
Yeah, it's a wonderful page.
That recently.
Companion piece.
Yeah.
Last year, that recently.
Tim is furiously looking through his portfolio.
I put it on my blog a couple of years ago, but I guess that's not in the spirit of our nice fans watching this live.
Oh, no. Okay, well, Tim's having a look.
Oh, here it is.
Gene, did you have any?
Oh.
Okay.
Which one did I put on? This one. Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Oh, nice. This is at the beginning of the story where Scarlet is parachuting down into the high Sierras, where Storm Shadow is staying at Snake Eyes' the remnants of his cabin.
On the back, some ink.
Ink. Wow.
Very nice.
Stuff. So, Gene, any final thoughts from you as we begin to wrap up?
No, just I enjoyed being here, and as I said, this was very illuminating, even to somebody who has pored over this material countless times over the last 30 odd years. So, no, this has been great.
Thank you for joining us and sharing your assets and your reflections and your time.
Oh, you're very welcome.
So this is where we wrap up and say where people can find us. So Tim, where can people find you?
My store is Hub Comics in Somerville, Massachusetts, hubcomics.com. And my G.I. Joe blog is a realamericanbook.com.
Good. And if we've got new listeners, then you can find out more about the show and about us over at talkingjoe.co.uk. Gene, do you want to plug where people can find you?
Yeah, I would say mostly two places. First of all, I'm on Comic Art Fans under Gene P. If you look up, Larry Hama, G.I. Joe 21 original art, that should bring you somewhere to my gallery. And I also have a hobby-focused Instagram account. It's collections_GP. I would say it's about probably 75% trading cards, 25% comics, original art, role-playing games, books, and kind of miscellaneous collectibles, because I collect a lot of different things. So yeah, those two places.
Brilliant. Okay, so Tim, were you about to say something?
Thinking of the jingle that I'm going to sing in a minute.
Yes, because when all is said done,
you say our website.
No. I say our website. Do I? Okay, well, you can find us at talkingjoe.co.uk. But remember,
when all said and
when it's all said and done. It's scrolling down the bottom, Tim.
Nobody beats Talking Joe, a real American podcast.
And knowing is half the battle.
And now we know all about issue 21 for sure. Thanks for joining us, guys. Laters.